Scale formulas, C major, A minor, and related modes. This time looking at the C major scale, otherwise known as the C Ionian mode, starting our scale from the C note located on the top heavy string of the guitar, fret number 8, and this is part number 2. One of our major objectives as well as one of our minor objectives, because we focus on both the majors and the minors here, is to line up all of our resources in the same direction, making them as easy on the eyes as possible from the perspective of the player of the guitar, who is of course located behind the guitar. Therefore, for example, my guitar is going to look like I'm playing left-handed, but I'm not. We just rotated it around in order to mirror your perspective from behind your guitar as though you were playing it into a mirror. Similarly, our Excel worksheet representing the fretboard is going to have this representing the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, top to bottom, left to right, situated as though we just took our guitar and imprinted the strings on the screen, allowing us to line up our worksheet on top of what I am doing as we have mirrored the image, and line it up to what you are doing from behind your guitar. That's going to be the idea. We're practicing our formulas now, and we're trying to cram in as much as possible. So the goal of these kind of exercises is to get as little time as possible to cram in as much theory as we can and practice it in part with just basically repetition and kinesthetic feeling on the fretboard, so that we can basically get that practice in and cram as much into it as we can. So knowing that, remember the ways that we can learn the different shapes on the fretboard is we can learn them by shape, using possibly the caged system, moving the shapes up the fretboard, and possibly breaking the fretboard into 5 positions that nice and neatly fit 4 to 5 frets, because we have 4 to 5 fingers. Another way that we can do it is we can basically look at each note and look at the intervals from each note, kind of like we were drawing a circle by putting the point of the compass on one particular note and drawing around it based on the distances, the intervals. And then the third way, the way we're focusing primarily on here, although we'll touch on all of these ways, is the formula. And we usually learn that as whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half from the perspective of the major scale. But we'd also like to learn it from the perspective of other modes as well. We're going to be starting here, of course, with the major scale, because the major scale is our key, our point of reference. If we're able to do that, then of course we can identify, if I can count through the whole, whole, half formula, it might make it a little bit easier for me to identify what relative position I am in the scale, as well as what I would call the absolute position, naming the actual mode that we're in, which will allow us to then build chords on that, because once we know the relative position, I can know whether or not I'm going to be playing a major or minor chord on it. So that's going to be the general idea, the things we're going to try to cram in our mind by just repetition, raw repetition here. So the general idea, remember, is that the C, or the major scale, is our kind of Rosetta Stone typically in Western music. It's just another mode, though. We call it it's the Ionian mode from the standpoint of the modes. So we're going to be working with the C major, which is going to be typical because it has no sharps and flats, but the same concept can be pushed forward. So a lot of people say, well, why you only do one scale here? Well, the whole concept can be pushed forward. The C major fits nicely on the guitar, similar as it does on a piano, although, I typically look at it as a minor scale more, because that A is right in the middle of the guitar, so that tends to be quite nice. So there's a lot of reasons to use it, and in the guitar, again, it's so much more movable, because then again you can move this whole shape to the left or the right to shift to any other key. You can't just play it. It's not like I'm not saying that I could just flip everything in a second in my mind and play it, because you have to practice it kinesthetically with your fingers. But conceptually, that makes sense. So that's kind of why we focus in there from my perspective. So then we're going to say, so then we have the relative positions here. So we name the relative positions, 7 notes out of 12 notes in the musical alphabet. And then I'm also going to give them the names of the modes, noting we want to know the names of the modes for a couple different reasons. One is that it helps us to better identify how we can build chords based on the relative position. So once I learn all of these notes in the scale, I can play through the scale, and that's cool, but I might not know how to build a chord from each note in the scale. What would be great is if I can build a chord. We typically learn that the 1-3-5 or the 1-4-5 in a major scale has a major chord construction, in other words, a major third, which we might then learn to construct along the top of the fretboard by using the caged systems or bar chords, which on the top string would be an E major and E minor shape chord, like this in open position, which is going to be barred off, right? Or on the second string down would be an A position, right? An A position like this or like this, right? That we can move up, or the A minor like this, right? That we can move up. That's typically, what we learn. However, I'd like to be able to know a little bit more in terms of what that bar chord is encompassing, what are all the notes in it, and to be able to play 3-note chords possibly in the middle or bottom of the guitar, be able to break that shape down into smaller 3-note triad kind of components. So that's going to be something that we can break down and understand a little bit more, as well as being able to add like the 7, the 9, 11, and 13, the 9, 11, and 13 being equivalent to the notes we skip when we go through the scale, the even ones, the 2, 4, and 6. So that's going to be the idea. Now, so to do that, it'd be nice if I know not only that it's the 1, 4, 5, but the modal chord. So when I go to the 5, for example, I'm going to be playing a Mixolydian modal chord, which has actually a flat 7. That's the kind of thing I'd like to be able to start to visualize, rather than being locked into just playing a major chord. And the only way to do that is to learn the modes. Also, when I move to another mode, like the Dorian mode, or the most common one being the Ionian mode, the minor scale, now all the notes are the same if it's the related minor scale, but the relative positions are different. That's a problem, because now I know the same notes are there, and I might be able to identify the root, but it's going to be hard for me once again to play the chords in the key when I'm looking at it from the perspective of the minor, if I simply remembered that the 1, 4, 5 are major chord constructions based on the major scale, because now it's not the 1, 4, 5 anymore because I'm in a different scale. But if I learned the absolute positions, the modes, then I'm going to try to orientate that based on the major scale. So I'm going to use the major scale as I'm turning around, as we're on this planet rotating around in a circle. I need to assign a point of reference to orient myself in the right direction. If I'm in space and I'm floating around, I'm going to get disoriented unless I choose a random point of reference to focus on. In Western music, that's typically the C. Therefore, I'm going to give the modes an absolute numbering system based on the major scale. So even though I'm in the minor scale here, and the 1, the 1 is now an A is now the 1 in this particular scale, I'm still going to say it's an absolute mode number 6, right? And then that means it's the relative position of 6 compared to the major scale, which helps me to identify it. If I go to the 4 of the Aeolian, then I'm actually going to this D in our notes here, but I'm going to still call it absolute mode number 2, relative position to the major scale, which is the Dorian mode. That helps to situate me, orient myself to be able to know that D then is going to be playing a minor scale, not only that, but a Dorian modal chord, if I was to go to that. So all that kind of stuff I want to kind of understand. And then the next way that we can learn things in here is by shape within the shape. I'm going to break each of these shapes into what I would call a 2-2-1 breakout on the strings, because there's a repeated string here. The E string is repeated at the top and the bottom. So that means there's really 5 strings So I could break out my shapes by 2 pair strings. So within this shape, which is basically the normal pentatonic shape that many people call like position 1 or a G-shaped pentatonic, right? And then if I add another key to get the 7 notes, it sounds like that. So within all of these shapes, you have what I would call two string shapes, which I'm calling a double stop, this double stop, and then I call this the house or the box, and then I call this the two note per string. I call it the meat of the hamburger, because the other way you can look at this is from a pentatonic standpoint, which I won't get into now. And then we have this shape, which is the box or house double stop, which is shifted up because this tectonic plate shifts up, meaning there's a difference or a kink in the tuning between the G and the B. So see, this and this makes that same square that you see up here. So if I can see it that way, again, no matter what mode I'm playing, major, Dorian, Phrygian, you have the same box. And I can name each of the notes in the box by mode, giving them an absolute modal number, even though the relative position will differ. So see, I'm trying to orient myself. I'm floating around in space. We're going around in circles, measuring from different perspectives, but I'm going to try to tie myself to that one major perspective so that I can not get dizzy. I don't lose track of where I am. That's going to be the idea. Okay. All right, let's first just count through this. So down here, I've got the whole half kind of formula. I'm going to count it on one string because remember this, it starts over. So there's 12 frets, 12 notes in the musical alphabet. If you wrap the string around in a circle, then you would basically have a circle of the 12 steps like a clock. And so that's what we want to be thinking about. You could, of course, keep going past the 12 steps, would be going past the 2 dots, but you're going to run out of space on the guitar at some point, some guitars being longer than others. If you have an electric guitar, then you have more room to work up there. But we're going to try to keep it basically within the 12 frets is the general idea. So let's say that when I count up, let's just count the formula, and then we'll go into it, repeat the formula. Now I'm going to count the formula first on the one string, and then we're going to count it within the space. So on the one string, if I go from the first, this is the first position to the second position, relative position 1 to 2, here's relative position 1 numbered here. This represents a whole step, which is 2 notes away. That's what a whole step means. Our unit of measure is a half step, 1 note away, and a whole step just means 2 of those half steps. So we're going to say it's a whole step to the 2 to get to this D. And then so if we're on the 2, we take a whole step to get to the E. So we're going to take a whole step to get to the E. That E is repeated over here in open position. So I'll move it over to the open position. So when I go to the 3, a whole step to the 3, which is repeated over here. That's what I mean about wrapping the string around in a circle. And then we're going to go from the 3 to the 4 is where the half step is. And you can always remember that from a note standpoint. There's a natural half step between the E and the F. There's no E sharp or F flat. So now we're going to be going from the 4 to the 5. From the 4 to the 5 is a whole step. So 4 to 5 is the whole step. And then when we go to the 5 to 6 is going to be a whole step. 5 to 6 is a whole step. And then from 6 to 7 is a whole step, 6 to 7 is a whole step, and then when we go from 7 to 8 or 1, back around in the circle, we are taking a half step going home. And so you can kind of name these in terms of the modes by where the half steps are, because there's only 2 half steps, right? So if you know where the half steps are, that gives you an idea. If you've got a half step going home, then you're either in the Ionian, you're in one of the major modes, and more specifically, you're in the Ionian mode or you're in the Lydian mode, because the mixed Lydian mode has the difference of the 7 being a minor 7. Okay, let's do the same thing within the shape. So if I'm in the shape, right, so what's going to happen, we're going to go from the C, instead of going to the D out here, I'm going to go back here. Let's see if I can do this on the guitar as well. So we're on the C. Instead of going to the D this way, a whole step going out here, I'm going to go to the whole step down. So how do I know it's a whole step? Because there's a 5-note distance between the strings. So it's 5, 4, 3, 2. A 2-note distance or a whole step. So in other words, from pinky to pointer is going to be a whole step. So then we're going to go from, that's from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, from 2, and from this is going from 2 to 3 is a whole step. So we go from 2 to 3, so it would be from this D to here is going to be a whole step. And then we're going to go from the 3, which is going to be here, which repeats over here. So now notice I'm going up the shape here, but I'm following this bottom string when I'm looking at the wholes and half steps, even though I'm working up the shape. So I have an E here, which represents the E based on the bottom string as we kind of work through our whole half as though it was happening in a linear format. Hopefully that makes sense. So now we're going from the 3 to the 4. That's going to be a half step. So 3 to the 4 brings us to the F. So 3 to the 4 brings us to the F, boom. And then we go from the 4 to the 5 is going to be a whole step. So that goes from pinky to pointer once again. Pinky to pointer. Whoops. And we can see that that's going to be a whole step. Why? Because there's a distance between 5 notes between the string. 5, 4, 3, 2. A 2-note distance. And then we go from the 5 to the 6 is a whole step. So 5 to 6 is a whole step. And then we're going to say 6 to 7 is going to be a whole step. So once again, it's pinky to pointer. So I'm going to go back here. 6 to 7 is going to be. And that's because there's a distance of 5 between these strings. 4, 3, 2, whole step. And then from 7 to 8 or 1 is going to give us the half step going back home, in this case to the octave, if we're in the shape. Now, if you look at that same thing from a absolute modal position, what's happening? We're going from absolute mode number 1 to what I would call absolute mode number 2, which is going to be the Dorian, right? And then we're going to go to absolute mode number 3, which is going to be the Phrygian mode. We go to absolute mode number 4, which is going to be the Lydian mode. We go to absolute mode number 5, which is going to be the Mixolydian mode. Absolute mode number 6, which is the Aeolian mode. Absolute mode number 7, which is the Locrian mode. And then back to absolute mode number 1, the Ionian mode. Now those mode numbers line up to the relative position because I named them based on the key of the major scale, but they will not line up if we go to another key, like the Dorian will have a different key, right? So now if I go to the 7 of the Dorian, it's going to be absolute mode number 1, which will be the same C in that same kind of position. It's a general idea I'm trying to lock into my mind and think about in different ways. Okay, so so now we've done, now let's look at the last time we kind of emphasized this second here. So this time we're going to emphasize the third, and I'm going to walk through the scale, but when I get to the third, I'm going to then measure on each string the third. We're going to jump through where I can get to the third from each string. It's a general idea. So let's first think about the interval of the third. So as I walk up to the third, it's going to be in our formula. Let's go back, bring this to the 1. It's going to be a whole step to the 2 and then a whole step to the 3, right? So that means how far away is the third? On a major scale, it's 4 notes away. It's a 4-note away, which is what we call a major third. So a major third is defined as basically 4 notes away. So I'm going to try to look at the interval for this particular position. I'm measuring it step by step. When we measure it step by step formula-wise, we usually don't use these interval terms. We usually call them whole and half step. So it's 2 whole steps away. But we can also name it as, if we look at those in intervals, it would be 2 major seconds away, because a major second is a 2-note away major second. And then that means that we have a total distance of 4. We call that distance a 4-note away major third. So if I go from this C to this E, so we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be a 4-note away major third. So I can measure that distance either. I can call it a 4-note away major third, or I'm also thinking of it as going from the absolute mode number 1 to the first note in absolute mode number 3. In other words, I'm going from the Ionian to the Phrygian. When I go to the Ionian to the Phrygian, then that's always going to be a 4-note away major third. I want to emphasize that in my mind, because that means that if I'm in the Dorian mode, for example, same notes, but now the D is the 1. So now I'm going from the relative position 7 to the relative position 2. But it's still going from Ionian to the Phrygian mode, right? Hopefully I got that right. We're going from the Ionian to the Phrygian, Ionian to the Phrygian. So the Ionian always lives in the house, so it's the top right of the box. And then the Phrygian is going to be over here. It's actually in the box as well. It's on the bottom of the house box. It lives in the basement. So we go from the 1 to the 3 to the major third, or the Ionian to the Phrygian, is always going to be a 4-note away major third. Okay, so now let's look at it on each string. So there it is on this string. If I go from the 1, 2, 3, we counted it through. Now let's say that I go from the 1 to the 2. So I'm gonna try to keep myself in the shape now. So I go from 1 to the 2, and then we're gonna go to the 3 here. That's gonna be remaining in the shape. So we go from the 1 to the 2 is going to be a whole step to the 2, and then we go from the 2 to the 3 is going to be a whole step to the 3, and that's going to basically keep us within the shape. And then I'm going to continue on this one on the same string. So I'm on the 3 here, and we're going to go from the 3 to the 4 is going to be 3 to the 4 is going to be a half step. So we're on C, 1, 2, 3, 4 is a half step. And then I'm going to go this time in the same string from 4 to 5 is going to be a whole step. So now I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to on the same string this time. From 4 to 5 is a whole step. And then we're going to go from 5 to 6 is a whole step. So from 5 to 6 is a whole step. That A repeats over here. So that A repeats over here. And that's the 6. So that A is the open A. And then A to B is a whole step, which is going to be 6 to 7 is a whole step. And then 7 to 8, or home, is a half step. Okay, and so that takes us back home. All right, let's think about each of those notes as it compares to the C here, and think about it as intervals, not compared to each step, but compared to the root, the C here. So if I went from comparing the 1 to the 2, so if I compare this C to that D, that's going to be a 2-note away major second. If I go from the C to the E, that's going to be a 4-note away major third. If I go from the C to the F, that's going to be a 5-note away perfect fourth. If I go from the C to the G, that's going to be a 7-note away perfect fifth. And if I go from the C to the A, that's going to be a 9-note away major 6. And if I go to the A's over here, so if I go to the B, to the A to the B, which would be way back here. What? Right, that would be an 11 note away major 7, and that's going to bring me back to the octave. So the octave is going to be here. Same note, right? So you can kind of play through the scale there, right? So this is going to be 1 to the 2, 1. So this is the first, second, first, third, first 4, first 5, first 6, first 7. Wait, hold, did I get that right? Let me do that again. First, perfect first, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major 6, and then major 7, and then back to the octave. So that's, you can kind of walk through it basically that way. Now you can also count out the distances on each of those if we wanted to. Maybe I'll do that next time. So that's going to be the idea. Okay, so now let's think about it going backwards, right? So now let's say, okay, what if I'm going in the reverse direction? This gets a little bit wonky. So now I'm going, if I'm on this W, notice when I was going forward, it was a whole step from the 1 to get to 2 here. Now I'm looking at the destination. I'm going from 1 back to 7. So I'm looking at the half step over here. So I'm putting my reference on the destination that I'm going to. So if I'm on this C, we're going back. It's a half step going from what you can call 8. It might be easier to call this 8 when we're going down, or 1, right? But 8 down to 7. And then we're going from 7 down to 6. 7 down to 6 is going to be the destination, will be a whole step. 7 down to 6. And then we're going from 6 down to 5 is going to be a whole step. 6 down to 5. And then we're going to go from 5 down to 4 is going to be a whole step. 5 down to 4. And then 5 down to 4, and then 4 to 3 is going to be a half step, which is also here on the 12th fret. So let's bring that up here on the 12th fret. And then we're going to go 3 to 2 is a whole step, 3 down to 2, and then 2 down to 1 brings us back home. And we're looking at the whole step to get to the destination back home. All right, so that's going to be the general idea going backwards. Let's do it in position now. So let's start from down here, the octave. That's going to be this C. And let's work it backwards. So we're going to say, okay, then once again, I'm going to say from the 8 or 1 back to the 7 is a half step. And so that takes me from the C to the B. That's a half step. And then we're going to go down from the B to the A. That's going to go from the 7 to the 6. That's a whole step on the destination. Now, I know that's a whole step because I'm going pinky to pointer, in this case pointer to pinky. Usually I see it going the other way. Now, something interesting to note here is that when I count the distance, I usually count it from downwards, right? So I say 5 notes between the string, 5, 4, 3, 2, a distance of 2. If I count it from here, then I can count it up. I can say the distance between the two is going to be 5 going up this way, and then 4, 3, 2. So the distance between them is 2. But remember, when we look at the actual the intervals between the B and the A is going to be the inverse interval, because notice we're going up, we're going above it. So I have to take the intervals are always going in one direction. So if I'm going from this B to this A, then it's going to be a whole step difference or distance, which is 2 notes, but it's going to be an inverse interval, which will be 12 minus 2, or a 10 note away, which is a minor 7. Okay, so let's go down from the 6 to the 5. 6 to the 5 is going to be a whole step. So we're going from 6 to the 5 as a whole step, and then 5 down to 4 is going to be a whole step from 5 to 4. So from pointer to pinky, and I know that's a whole step or 2 notes away because it would be 5 up here, 4, 3, 2 if I counted it out. And then we're going from the 4 to the 3 is going to be a half step. 4 to the 3 is a half step. And then that 3 repeats in my one string here. So there's a 3 to the 2 is going to be a whole step. And then the 2 to the 1 is going to be a whole step. Brings me back home, and I know that's going to go a whole step because it's 5 distance here, 4, 3, 2 to get back home. So once again, I'm going to emphasize this distance of the third now, the 4 note away minor third, going backwards. So notice if I'm looking at going from the E to the C in the key of the C major from the perspective of this, as though that's my tonic, I would be going back from the relative position 3 to relative position 1. But if I'm looking at it from the perspective of the E, then what would that be? I'd be going from the absolute mode 3, which would be the Phrygian, going back to absolute mode number 1, which would be the Ionian. So if I looked at it from the standpoint of a Phrygian modal chord, for example, then how can I make the Phrygian the 1? How can I convert this to looking at it from the Phrygian's perspective? So if I say it's absolute mode number 3, relative third position to the major scale, to get it to 1, I'd have to subtract 2. So I'm going to say Phrygian minus 2. The 3 takes it to relative position 1. So the E would be the 1. And then relative to the E being the 1, I'd have to do the same for the Ionian. Ionian minus 2. 1 minus 2 would be negative 1. You can't have a negative, so there's 7 modes. So 7 plus negative 1 would be 6. So that would be going from the Phrygian's perspective. I would be going from relative position 1 to the 6. And the 6 is equivalent to the 13. And this is from a chord construction standpoint. If I scroll down to Phrygian, you can see on the Phrygian worksheet here, now we have relative position 1 is the E, absolute mode number 3, Phrygian though, and then the 6 is going to be the 6th relative position to the Phrygian is absolute mode Ionian, the 1. So I'm trying to basically see this from multiple perspectives. If I look at the distance from the E to the C, I can look at it from the perspective of the major scale that I'm in, or I can look at it from the perspective of making the E the root, which would be useful if I'm trying to build a modal chord which has all the same notes that are in the scale that I'm in, right? So and again, I can convert the Phrygian. That's going to be the idea there. Okay, and then if I think about the scale in terms of intervals going in reverse, right? I could say, okay, now I'm going from the 1 from the 1 position, let's say, to the 7, which is going to be the B, and so I'm going to say this is going to be 1, 7, so that would be the 11 note away major 7, and then I'm going to go back to the 9 note away major 6. So 1 to the 9 note away major 6, which I can shift up here. 1 to the 9 note away major 6. 1 to the 7 note away perfect 5th. So I'm going back here This is going to be the 7-note away perfect fifth. 1 to the 5-note away perfect fourth. 5-note away perfect fourth. 1 to the 4-note away perfect fourth for the 4-note away major third, and then to the 2-note away major second, and then to the back to the octave. All right, let's see if I can do the next string down and make this a little bit more succinct. So now I'm going to go to the next one. And so now I'm going to count up the scale, but then I'm going to skip down when I get to this interval to the next string, and then I'm going to count up on this string. So I'm going to go from, all right, we're going from the first, the position to the second position in scale. So we're going to say it's going from here, we've got a whole step to go to the second. And then we're going to go from the second, instead of going here, I'm going to look for the next string down. I'm going to break the pattern and go down here and then go on that string going down. So that means that I'm looking from the perspective of this second note. The distance is going to be a 2-note away, which we could call a major second, or a whole step. So it'd be a whole step away, which would be 5 notes between these two strings. 5, 4, 3, 2, or pinky to pointer. So I can go from here down to this E. That would be the next note in the scale, the 4-note away major third. And then when I'm on this position, note that this Phrygian that we've been focusing on, once again lives at the bottom of the house, what I call the basement of the box. It was the same position over here, same here, because these are octaves. It's going to be 5 strings up and up 1 fret. All right, so then we're going to say, okay, so that's going to be there. And so now we're going to continue on this string. And we're on, what am I on? The second, that was to the third. And now we're on the third, which is a half step. Here's a repeat of the third is a half step to get to the 4. So now we're going to go from 3 to 4 is a half step. And then 3 to 4 is a half step, and then from 4 to 5 is a whole step. So we're going to say, okay, 4 to 5 is a whole step, and then we're going to go from 5 to 6 is a whole step, from 5 to 6 is a whole step, and then from 6 to 7 is a whole step, 6 to 7 is a whole step, and then 7 to 8, or back home, is a half step. So 7 to 8, or home, is a half step. Okay, so now I can walk up this entire string if I wanted to, right? So now I can say, let me compare this string all the way across and go through the intervals. So we'd have, okay, the octave is right there, so that would be a perfect first. And then we'd have a whole step going to the 2, right? So now we're going from the first whole step to the 2, would be going from here to here, and that would be a 2-note away major second. So from here to here, 2-note away major second, and that's going to be repeated over here. So I'm on that D. So if I go to that D to the E, that's going to be our third. So that's going to be a 4-note away major third. When I go from, it's a whole step away, 4-note away major third, from this C to that E, right? And then we're going to go from the E to the F, which is going to be going from the third to the fourth, which is a half step. And that's going to be then a 5-note away perfect fourth. Wait a second. I went on the wrong string. Hold on. This needs to go to this E. There, I thought something sounded funny. So that's I'm getting a little out of it. So I'll get in the routine again. So then we're going to go to the F. Okay, that makes sense. And then we're going to go from there to the 7-note away perfect fifth, the G, 7-note away perfect fifth, and then that goes to the 9-note away major 6 or the A, and that goes to the 7-note away or the 11-note away major 7, which goes here, and that brings us back to the octave. All right, I kind of messed that one up, but that's the idea. All right, let's do it in reverse. So if we did it in reverse, now let's start from here and just bring it back the other way on the same string. So now we're on, let's see if I can get this right this time. I'm on an 11-note away. So now I'm going to go to the destination, which is a half step back. So the destination is going to be a half step back this time. Okay, so let's just walk it through on one string instead of doing the, so we'll go a half step back. So we're going to go from that C back would be an 11-note away major 7. Half step back would be an 11-note away major 7. So octave. And now we're going to go back from 7 to the destination of 6 is a whole step. So that'd be a 9-note away major 6. Whole step back, 9-note away major 6 would be. Right? And then we're going to go back to from the 6 to the 5 is a whole step. So we're going to go a whole step back, and that would be a 7-note away perfect fifth. 7-note away perfect fifth. And then we're going to bring that back from to the 4. So we're going to go to the 4 whole step destination of the 4, which will be a whole step. And that's going to be a 5-note away perfect fourth. And that's going to be the F. And then we're going to take that going from the 4 to the 3 is going to be a half step. 4 to the 3 is going to be a half step. And it might be easier to play up here. That's going to be a 4-note away major third from here to, where was I? Over here. Now wait a sec. Oh man, I got messed up. There's the E. So now I'm going from the 3 to the 2 is going to be the D. That's the open position. I totally got messed up, sorry. Or that could be an open here. So that's going to be here, and then that brings it back to the 1. All right, I should redo that again, but I'm going to keep going forward because I want to try to get to the next string. So let's say we go to the next one down, and we're going to say, okay, I'm going to go to the 1 to the 2, and then I'm going to skip up to the 3, which is going to be here. So from the perspective of this D, it would be a whole step, right? So if I went from the 1, from here, 1, 2, and then I'm going to skip up to this E right there. So how would that be? It's going to be a whole step. Why? Because if I counted it out, it'd be 5, 10, 11, 12, gets me back to the D, so I can start that over at 1 and 2. If I counted it from the perspective of the C, then it would be a 3-note away major, a 4-note away major third. How can I check that? It'd be a distance of 5, 10, 15 from the C. 15 minus 12 is going to be what I would be 3, because there's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet, plus 1 would be 4. So now I'm going to go through this again, but then I'm going to jump up to this E. So it would be going from the first to the second, and then I'm going to jump up here to that, whoop, right there. And so now I'm going to continue on from the E and say we're going to go from, that's going to be from the first to the second. From first to the second was a whole step. From the second to the third was a whole step. And now we're on the third, which I'm going to go over here. So the third to the fourth is a half step. So third to the fourth is a half step. So we're going a half step up. So that would be here. So now we're on there. Let's measure it from the top. So we went a half step up. So that's going to be a 5-note away perfect fourth. And then when I go from the third to the, when I go from the fourth to the fifth, it's a whole step. Fourth to the fifth. And then the fourth to the fifth is going to be a whole step, which from the perspective of the C is a 7-note away perfect fifth. Okay, and then I can repeat that over here in open position on that G. And then when I go from the fifth to the sixth, it's going to be a whole step going from the G to the A. So G to the A. So I'm looking at this C and then this A. And then when I go from the 6 to the 7, it's going to be a whole step. 6 to the 7, 6 to the 7 is going from this C to this B. So now I've got from C to B. And then when I go from the 7 back home to 8 or 1, it's a half step. Whew. Let's try to just go back the other way now. So now I'm gonna see if I mess this up again. So we have the octave, and then I'm gonna go back from 7 or 8 back to 7. So I'm looking at the destination now. So I'm gonna go back to 7. So that would be, and going from here around the horn back to the 7, which is an 11-note away major 7. So it would be down to here. And then we're going to go from the 7 to the 6, which would be a whole step to get to the 9-note away major 6 from the perspective of the D. So it would be a whole step back to get to the 9-note away major 6, which was here. And then I'm going to go from that A, would be a whole step to go back to the 5th. And it would be on this G, but it's going to be easier to reach up top. So I'm going to go around the horn up here to here. So now I'm going up to this G note here. So I'm looking from this C to that G. Oh, this G is a 7-note away perfect 5th. And then we're going to go from the 5th down to the 4th, which is a whole step 5th to the 4th. And then that's going to go down from the perspective of the C. It's going to be a 7. That F is a 5-note away perfect 4th. And then we're going to go from the 4th down is a half step to get to the 3rd, the destination to the 3rd, and that's going to be back to the 3rd. So half step to get back down to the 3rd. I'm already on. Wait a second. Hold on a second. I got messed up again. So we're on the 3rd, which is going to be that E right there. Que paso? Something seems funny to me. No, that's right. It's going down to the 3rd here. And then, so we have the third repeats here. Third down to the second is going to be a whole step down to the second, which brings it down to the D. So from here to the D. Oops. And then we're going to go from that back to the 1, from the 2 to the 1. Destination is a whole step, and then, and I skipped one, whole step. All right, hopefully that wasn't beautifully done, but it was done, so we're practicing. Let's do the next one. So now again, I'm going to go to the 1 to the 2, and then I'm going to skip down to this string to get to the third. So the third would be, if I count this up, I'm looking for a distance of 2 from this second. So this is the second to get to this 2 note away to get to here. So it would be 5, 10. The fault line is right here. So this note shifts up. So I have to say 5, 10, 15, and then 15 minus 12 is 3, back to 2. If I measure it from the C, then it would be a distance once again of a 4 note away major third. So it'd be 5, 10, and then 15. 15 minus 12 is 3. Then here's the fault line. This shifts up here, so it'd be 3 plus 5 is 8. 7, 6, 5, 4. A distance of a 4 note away from the C, a distance of a 2 note away from the D. Okay, so if I was to say that, I'm going to say this is going to be 1, 2, and then 3. So I jumped up an octave, 1, 2, 3, right? And then I'm going to count it up on this string and say now we're on 3, and then 3 to 4 is going to be, so if I say the third, let's count it up from here. So that would be, a 4 note away major third. So if I start from there, I'm going to say it's a 4 note away major third. It's a whole step to go from there to the fourth. So wait a sec. So it's a third. Yeah, 4 note away major third, whole step. It's a half. Okay, wait a sec. Okay, pause. So here. So I'm on this E, and it should be a half step to go up. Right. Okay. So 4 note away major third, half step to go up. So we're going to go up to the 5th. So we're going from here to here. All right, there we go. All right, there's a half step, and that would be from here to here. Okay. Well, and that's going to be a 5 note away perfect fourth. We go from here to here, so that's going to be from the 4th to the 5th is a whole step to here. So from here to that G, 7 note away perfect 5th. And then if I go from the 5th to the 6th is a whole step from here to here. So we're going to go from here to here, and that's going to bring us to the A. So if I measure it from the C, that would be a 9 note away major 6. And then if I go from the 6 to the 7, it's a whole step. So 6 to 7 is a whole step, and that would be to the B, which would be an 11 note away major 7, and that's repeated over here. And then that brings us back to the C octave. And then the second, if I go from the 1 to the 2, because we went to the 2 up top, it would be the D. Right? And then that brings us back to kind of where we started this time, which was on the 3rd, which is that E. Okay, my brain is totally mush, so I think that's a good sign that I'm confusing myself, so that could be good, could be bad. But the last string is equivalent to the top string, so I'm not going to go through it like in detail right now. I won't go backwards again because I'll probably mess that up at this point. So next time we'll continue on and we'll do the similar routine, but break it up at the third. And then again, I'll try to work in, as I get more fluid with this, the idea of the shapes, the idea of naming each of the relative positions with the modal position. So the goal of this is to work on dexterity, to be able to switch my mind to see it from one perspective to the other perspective, to see the shape in terms of the shape, five pattern shapes up and down the guitar, to being able to see it within those patterns, breaking out the strings to a 2-2-1 breakout on the strings, to then be able to also see it from the standpoint of a formula, not just from the perspective of the major, but we'll then work in the formula for the other modes, starting them from different positions as we walk through the formula, being able not just to walk through the formula in one key, but divide the formula up in any area so that I can jump from one place to another and play the scale, but skip an octave or skip a string whenever I would like to do that. Would be the and so we want to try to cram all those kind of concepts into an exercise that can drill them in our mind as compactly as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. That's what we're working on.